Imagine footsteps so vast they gouge out lakes, an axe swing so mighty it flattens 100 pines at once. Tonight we journey into the mist-shrouded North Woods to summon the world's largest lumberjack, Paul Bunyan. But who was this towering figure born of campfire yarns? And how did his legend grow so colossal that it reshaped rivers, lakes, and even our idea of America itself? For over a century, storytellers have passed down tales of his feats, each more unbelievable than the last. Yet hidden beneath the exaggeration lies a reflection of the pioneer spirit, a testament to the power of myth to unite, entertain, and inspire. So grab your coat, stoke your campfire, and lean in close. This is the legend of Paul Bunyan. Our story opens in the late 1800s, deep in the logging camps that straddled Michigan and Minnesota. Here, men worked from dawn until dark, felling vast pines with only hand-forged axes. In the bitter chill of winter, when frost bit through woolen coats and the fires burned low, lumberjacks gathered around the embers to share tales that grew taller with every retelling. These were hard men leading harder lives. Ice-choked rivers stole their tools, wolves haunted their camps, and isolation tested their morale. But around the glow of a blazing fire, laughter rang out as stories took on a life of their own. One tale told of a man so enormous that his cradle could hold an ox. Another spoke of an ox so blue her footprints became cerulean ponds. In one Michigan camp, a logger named Tom O'Leary began describing a giant who could heave a tree like a toothpick. Across the camp, he told of a companion, a blue ox named Babe, whose strength matched that of 10 draft horses. With each retelling, the giant grew taller, Babe grew broader, and their adventures became more outlandish, stomping out wildfires, leveling mountain ranges, and turning stumps into dinner tables. Soon the story leapt from campfire to saloon, from river drive to rail town. Newspaper scribes painted Paul Bunyan as America's answer to European giants, a folk hero born of frontier grit and the longing for legend in a land still being tamed. What began as a set of jokes among friends became a national phenomenon, carried in pulpy magazines, roadside billboards, and eventually children's books. But at its core, the Paul Bunyan myth was about more than spectacle. It was a shared language for men facing brutal winters and lonely nights. Through humor and invention, they reclaimed control over a landscape that could crush them under ice or strip them of hope. And in doing so, they planted the seed for a legend that would outlive every logger's chopped-down tree. They say Paul Bunyan arrived in this world already towering over the doctors, and as a baby, his first wail uprooted 3 pine saplings. Witnesses claim the cry rolled through the forest like thunder, rattling the camp's lanterns and sending wolves scurrying for cover. Imagine an infant whose limbs spanned 10 times your height, whose cradle had to be carved from a single hollowed log. Midwives whispered that the linen swaddles were wide enough to bundle a calf, and that every time Paul shifted, the jostle felt like an earthquake. As Paul grew, so did the stories. By his first birthday, the towering toddler could lift stumps with ease. By age 5, he could clear entire farms in a single bound, his footprints leaving lakes where grains once ripened. Mothers would hush their children with warnings. Be good, or Paul Bunyan's shadow will stretch across your backyard tonight. Of course, no official record confirms his birth, and 19th century midwifery logs never mention a 22-foot infant. Yet in every retelling, the same essence remains. Paul's origins were rooted in hyperbole, but they were anchored to a real need, to find humor in hardship, to dream bigger than the tallest pine. No Paul Bunyan story is complete without Babe, the blue ox. Legend describes her as so massive that her horns formed natural archways over the logging road. Her coat glowed an otherworldly cerulean, so vivid that loggers claimed the ice crystals in her breath shimmered like sapphires. Together, Paul and Babe traversed the wilderness, leaving in their wake a trail of marvels. One summer's eve, Paul challenged Babe to race across a frozen lake. As she tore over the ice, her hooves carved furrows that later filled with spring melt, creating fish-rich ponds locals still marvel at today. They say Babe could wade across rivers thigh-deep and still emerge bone-dry, her fur shimmering beneath the full moon. In winter, Paul would use her broad back as a sled to haul logs 10 times the weight of any team of horses. Those who witnessed the blue beast said the sound of her breathing echoed like a steam engine, relentless and rhythmic. But for all her might, Babe was gentle, often depicted nudging injured loggers back to safety, or kneeling to allow children to climb atop her for fun. In illustration, she stands as an emblem of loyalty and strength, a fitting counterpart to Paul's boundless energy. Together, they embodied the human desire for friendship even in the wildest places. While Paul's birth and Babe's loyalty set the stage, it was Paul's feats that set imaginations ablaze. One tale, known as the 100-Tree Swing, recounts a single swing of Paul's axe that flattened 100 pines in one fell heave. The stump, still intact, was said to be as wide as a dinner table, which Paul used to feast under lantern light. On moonlit nights, he'd stand by the lake shore and chat with the northern lights, tipping his hat to the dancing hues above. Others spoke of his Backbone Falls exploit. Paul allegedly strapped 2 massive pines together, used them as skis, and slid down an entire mountain face at breakneck speed, carving a canyon that became a waterfall. But perhaps the most enduring myth is how Paul's footprints gouged the basin of Lake Superior. Storytellers would gesture to the shoreline and declare, "That's where Paul paused for lunch, his boot pressing deep into the earth." Generations of visitors marveled, half believing the world's largest freshwater lake was truly born from a giant's footprint. These stories spread nationwide in newspapers and broadsides. Showmen staged vaudeville acts claiming they'd seen Paul in lumberjack garb, striding between towns like a colossus. Cartoonists immortalized him in comic strips, and early film reels attempted to recreate his exploits with trickery and scale models. Through each medium, Paul's legend only grew larger than life, proving that myth thrives wherever wonder meets the will to believe. As Paul Bunyan's fame spread, local storytellers put their own spin on his legend. In Wisconsin logging camps, men joked that Paul's breath was so spicy it sparked chili peppers wherever he exhaled, hence the origin of the state's legendary pepper sauces. Out west in Oregon, another tale claimed Paul's snowshoe tracks over the Cascades left ridges so steep that future pioneers renamed them the Bunyan Peaks. Ranchers would point to distant summits and whisper, "Those are remnants of Paul's snowshoes. Travelers beware." In Canada's maritime provinces, the legend crossed borders and took on new life. There, Paul was said to have tapped maple trees so deftly that his splinters formed perfect barrels for syrup. Islanders used his myth to market their own lumber and syrup, proof that even in regions far from Michigan, Paul's influence endured. These regional variants kept the legend fresh, adapting Paul and Babe to local landscapes and humor. Each new detail, whether peppers, peaks, or sap barrels, revealed something about the community that told it. The myth was a living, breathing tapestry woven from the experiences and creativity of countless storytellers across North America. Beyond the spectacle, Paul Bunyan represents something deeper, our collective frontier spirit, the belief that one determined individual can reshape the wilderness. In an era when America itself was still a young nation, These stories gave hope to isolated workers, uniting them through shared humor and aspiration. Paul's exaggerated strength speaks to the human desire for mastery over nature. Yet Babe's gentle presence reminds us of companionship and stewardship. The campfire tales weren't just entertainment, they were tools for building morale, a counter to the isolation and risk of logging life. Myths like Paul's also bridged cultures. Immigrant loggers from Finland, Ireland, and Scandinavia found common ground in these American yarns, weaving their own characters into the narrative tapestry. Over time, Paul Bunyan became a symbol not just of Michigan or Minnesota, but of a multicultural frontier forged by countless hands. And while modern audiences may chuckle at the implausibility, the core message endures. Through cooperation, creativity, and a bit of tall tale spirit, communities can endure the harshest conditions. In every retelling, Paul Bunyan reminds us that myth-making is as vital as woodchopping, both necessary for building a world where wonder and work go hand in hand. Today, Paul Bunyan marches on in cartoons, children's books, and roadside attractions. In Bangor, Maine, a 31-foot statue proclaims his legacy. In rural Minnesota, a festival celebrates Bunyan Day with axe-throwing contests. Advertisers have also harnessed his image. Cereal companies featured a cartoon Paul on their boxes, and lumber brands still use his silhouette in logos. Even online, digital artists reimagine him as a video game boss, complete with pixelated blue ox companions. Yet for all the commercial spin, the core legend remains intact, a testament to the power of community storytelling. Each theme park ride, each children's bedtime book, carries forward the campfire's flicker, proof that one good story can outlive every fallen tree and every frozen river. Paul Bunyan's journey from whispered joke to national icon shows how myth transcends reality, morphing to fit the needs of each new generation. And as long as there are forests to film and fires to light, his legend will endure. Next time you pass a colossal stump or glimpse a mist-shrouded lake, remember the legend that carved them. Paul Bunyan isn't just a story, he's our shared imagination given shape and scale. Which frontier legend should we unearth next? Pecos Bill's Twister Ride, John Henry's Hammer Duel, or perhaps the Jersey Devil's Haunting Cries? Hit subscribe, cast your vote in the comments, and become part of the campfire conversation. Your story begins here.